Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
So there's been a lot happening. Now, last week, the ambassador, David Comissiong, would have given us a report on the outcomes of the second session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, which was held at UN headquarters in New York between the 30th of May and the 2nd of June. Now, today, he's going to be talking to us about what happened there. We're going to get to see some of that and also get us caught up on all that he has been doing in his recent travels. So let's go right ahead and welcome Ambassador David Comissiong as we start conversations on CARICOM for today. Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Good morning, Tisha. Pleasure to be here as usual. Last week, I did a report from my hotel room in New York, and we were looking forward to what was to unfold. We were about to begin the second session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. It was a 4-day session, and I took part in all 4 days, representing Barbados. I was also a panelist. I made a presentation to the panel on Pan-Africanism. So I want to give a report on the outcomes of that 4-day session. And just to give a little background, the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent is one of the newest United Nations entities. And that forum is a product of the 2001 United Nations World Conference Against Racism and the UN International Decade for People of African Descent, which actually will end at the end of 2024. And the purpose of this 10-person forum is really to focus on the rights, the human rights, the situation of people of African descent, to propose measures to protect our rights, to promote our interests. And I must tell you that we in CARICOM, we have 20% of the seats on the forum, in that 2 members of the 10-person forum are CARICOM representatives. That is Dr. June Suma of St. Lucia and Ms. Gaynell Curry of the Bahamas. So we, CARICOM, we should take a lot of pride in this forum. And so I was there really to support the work of this very important new institution.
That certainly is a lot of work. A lot has been happening. And a question on the Bridgetown initiative, though. I know that there's been a major thrust to kind of share that in multiple spaces. And we also have been hearing a lot about it. So this might be a diversion from a little bit from what you're talking about, but it certainly has been cropping up quite a bit.
Well, of course, I spoke about the Bridgetown initiative in my address to the forum, and I encouraged all delegates. And let me say that the delegates, it was a massive forum. The opening session was held at the UN General Assembly building. 900 civil society delegates from all over the world, many member state governments of the United Nations, many of the UN agencies were there. And there were 60, in addition to the forum itself, there were 60 side events. CARICOM held a side event at which I spoke. And so, yes, I took every opportunity to encourage what I call the entirety of global Africa to inform themselves about the Bridgetown Initiative and to rally around and support the Bridgetown Initiative, because if we can implement even half of what the Bridgetown Initiative is proposing, we will bring so many resources and so much more support for African and Caribbean nations and people, the black and brown nations and peoples of the world. But I must tell you that the 4-day forum produced many conclusions, many recommendations, but I have extracted about 13 that I think are perhaps the most important. To begin with, the forum has decided that it will take the lead in crafting a United Nations declaration on the promotion, protection, and full respect for the rights of people of African descent. This will be like an international charter that looks at the peculiar discrimination that is visited upon Black people, and it will be put forward to be adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations as a declaration of international law. Also, breaking news, the forum is adding its voice to the call for a second United Nations decade for people of African descent. The first decade will come to an end next year, and the feeling is that not enough was accomplished, that the United Nations did not take the decade for people of African descent seriously enough, and therefore there's a strident call for a second decade, and the Permanent Forum has said that the second decade must be dedicated to issues pertaining to reparations, issues pertaining to deconstructing and undoing the systemic anti-Black racism that is embedded in the international arena and in national societies around the world, and indeed to implementing the new declaration on the promotion, protection, and full respect for the rights of people of African descent. Reparations featured very strongly at the forum. I put forward the idea that the United Nations needs to establish a special international tribunal to adjudicate reparations claims. And that was accepted, and the Permanent Forum has agreed that it will begin the work of conceptualizing what such a special international reparatory justice tribunal would look like. And that work would then be introduced to the General Assembly of the United Nations. The forum has also recommended that we, just as we have our CARICOM Reparations Commission, that we establish a global reparations commission. The forum is also proposing that on a regular basis, that the forum engage with CARICOM and with the African Union so that they can come to CARICOM meetings, for example, African Union meetings, and discuss with our leaders the kinds of things that we need to be doing to advance the interests of people of African descent. It has also proposed that the UN establish a task force that pulls together all of the UN agencies that are dealing with issues pertaining to people of African descent or that are dealing with racism. So the Human Rights Council, the group of experts on the elimination of racial discrimination, the group of experts on people of African descent, the Permanent Forum itself, that all of these agencies should be brought together, that there should be a task force that brings together the work of all of these agencies in a collective plan of action. They're also proposing that the Secretary General of the United Nations put in place a special envoy to work with member states in implementing the collective agenda of all of these entities dealing with either anti-racism or promoting the interests of people of African descent. They're proposing that the UN put in place an affirmative action program within the United Nations itself to employ more people of African descent, that many of these international leadership posts should really be held by people of African descent, because we are currently underrepresented in these positions. And I can go on and on Tisha, as I said, for me, there were at least 13 very, very major outcomes.
That certainly is a lot to deal with in such a short space of time. And I know there's unrest in various places across the world, but I'm sure with people of African descent in focus, there was rich discussion on what's happening in Haiti presently and what's happening in Sudan.
Well, of course, in my address to the Pan-Africanism panel, those were some of the issues that I hit upon. The situation of Haiti. I made the case for African and Caribbean governments and nations partnering with each other to solve the problem of Haiti, of course, in collaboration with the people of that country. So the case I made is that just as Haiti is an internal Caribbean issue, but in the context of Pan-Africanism, our brothers and sisters on the African continent, the governments of the African Union, they should be working with us on our internal Caribbean issues, such as Haiti. And we likewise, our leaders should be meeting with their African counterparts to lend our expertise, our assistance in dealing with peacemaking on the African continent. And yes, Sudan is, you featured the Sudan in your news this morning. Very heartrending. And the Black world, we have to reach a stage where when these kinds of disruptive conflicts break out, that we have a collective mechanism for peacemaking. And so those words from me I think were very, very well accepted. The Permanent Forum did also endorse the position I put forward on Haiti and the fact that Haiti has been the subject of a neo-colonial destabilization campaign that goes back for many, many decades. But the Permanent Forum itself can't solve those issues. The Permanent Forum can send a signal or send a request or urging to Black governments and institutions to do what is necessary to come up with solutions. So the Permanent Forum is really about generating ideas, making calls upon the United Nations system, all the various entities, the member states of the United Nations system, and mobilizing support for the implementation of such ideas.
All right, now we'd like to take in a little bit of your presentation at that forum and then come back and close out today's discussion on a number of the issues that you touched on while you were presenting to the forum.
Yes, well, that was a presentation I made on the second morning of the forum. I was speaking to the topic of Pan-Africanism. I think you have the concluding part of my presentation after I had spoken about all of our successes, our advances, all of the work that Barbados and CARICOM was doing, connecting with Africa and so forth. Then I went into a segment where I spoke about some of the crises and challenges that face us. And I think this is the section that you are about to show.
Furthermore, we are determined to extend the African continent's Pan-African payments and settlement system to the Caribbean and to work towards establishing a linkage between the African continental free trade area and our own CARICOM single market and economy. And in February of this year, the African Union heads of state passed a resolution committing the AU to the pursuit of reparations for European-imposed African enslavement and to partnering with CARICOM in pursuing the reparations campaign. So there are many successes, but even while we celebrate these pleasing recent developments, we must be mindful of crisis situations and existential challenges that demand our collective attention and action as an African people. I refer to such matters as the prolonged crisis that has engulfed the Caribbean nation of Haiti, much of it caused by a long-standing neo-colonialist campaign against the world's first black republic. There's also cause for concern on the African continent, the several military conflicts that are bedeviling our continent in the Sudan, in Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, military coups in West Africa, and the list goes on. Then there's the climate crisis that is threatening the stability and even the long-term viability of so many Caribbean and African nations. And more generally, there's the continuing racist denigration of black and African people worldwide, the institutionalized violence and systematic denial of human rights that so many of our people are subjected to, particularly when they constitute racial minorities in white majority societies. And finally, the continued existence of colonialism and European colonies in our regions, especially in our Caribbean region. We are still the most colonized region, and we need to do something about it. So I want to conclude by urging us to use this UN space to discuss how African and Caribbean governments, for example, can be more engaged with each other in dealing with critical internal issues. There's no reason why the governments of the African Union should not be partnering with the governments of CARICOM in working out and implementing with the people of Haiti a solution to the crisis in that heroic Caribbean nation. Similarly, the statesmen of CARICOM should be sitting in council with their AU peers and lending their insights, experience, and resources to the task of peacemaking and nation building in Africa. The Permanent Forum can urge this greater collaboration and solidarity and partnership, can urge this upon our Caribbean and African and black governments across the globe. Let us also use this space to discuss how the entirety of global Africa can rally around and support the Bridgetown initiative, that cutting-edge revolutionary plan that was crafted in Barbados last year to fundamentally reform the inherently unjust and unequal global economic and financial system, thereby bringing relief and much-needed support to the black and brown nations and people of this world. I urge everyone to research the Bridgetown Initiative and let us rally around it. And finally, yes, please let this permanent forum take the lead in crafting a United Nations declaration on the promotion, protection, and full respect for the human rights of people of African descent. But in doing so, please remember that you would be building upon the historic work of many of the past stalwarts and champions of Pan-Africanism, most notably the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey and his 1920 Declaration of the Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World. Madam Chair, brothers and sisters, on behalf of the government and people of Barbados, and also on behalf of our Caribbean community, I extend our very best wishes to the members of this permanent forum We wish you every possible success and pledge our committed and continuing solidarity and support. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. David.
Quite well received, which is always what is expected of a presentation. And you managed to cover just about everything we talked about in that short 5-minute period. So yeah, I'm sure that you were pleased with the presentation and the feedback.
Yes, very, very much so. Whenever representatives of CARICOM and Barbados and CARICOM are in the house, we tend to come with something of substance, and it is often very well received. The only thing I would add in wrapping up our discussion is that the forum also looked very closely at issues pertaining to the migration of African and people of African people and the abuses that our migrants tend to be subjected to. And they have called upon the International Organization of Migration to do a special study and report on the experiences, the abuses of the rights of African and Black migrants worldwide. The forum also looked at the issue of anti-Black racism and the negative consequences on the health of our people, including mental health. And they have called upon the World Health Organization likewise to do a special study and report on the negative impacts of racism on the health of Black people and African people worldwide. Finally, they also made a point on insisting that member states of the United Nations must, when they are putting together their statistics, they must include disaggregated statistics that present the picture of what is happening, whether in health, in housing, in access to education, of the Black component of their population. And in fact, the Permanent Forum is going to do a pilot project with Brazil in testing how that system of statistical reporting can be most effective. So a very, very useful and important exercise. And the Permanent Forum will be presenting its full report to the General Assembly of the United Nations in September, October.
All right, well, thank you so much for a comprehensive review of the outcomes of that forum. And we certainly look forward to hearing what's coming up next with you as you continue to share more about Barbados and the region across the world. Thank you.
My pleasure, Tisha. Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.